On November 3rd, Pakistan's President Musharraf declared emergency. What amounts to martial law proclaims that the Pakistani constitution is suspended. Members of the Supreme Court have been removed from office, and hundreds of lawyers and human rights activists have been jailed. To discuss these developments, I'm joined by Eric Margolis, a Real News analyst and a contributing editor to the American Conservative magazine and the Sun News chain. Eric, President Musharraf, when he cited the declared emergency, in his declaration, he describes the unraveling security situation, particularly the fight with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and the whole tribal situation is getting more aggravated, more serious. We hear reports that some of this fighting is moving closer to major cities. And then he focuses his attack on the judiciary and the Supreme Court. Whereas some members of the judiciary are working at cross purposes with the executive and legislature in the fight against terrorism and extremism, thereby weakening the government and the nation's resolve and diluting the efficacy of its actions to control this menace. And in a later paragraph he says, whereas some hardcore militants, extremists, terrorists, and suicide bombers who were arrested and being investigated were ordered to be released, and based on this, he ends his declaration by saying the Constitution of Pakistan will be suspended, clearly to strengthen the fight against terrorism. Is this what's going on in Pakistan? Is this what's motivating this martial law? And what's the context here?
The growing violence in Pakistan is certainly a motivating factor that's propelling the political developments there, but it is not the cause of what President General Musharraf just did. What happened was that his authority was being challenged, and he moved swiftly, many people predicted that would happen, to shut down the Constitution and to impose martial law. The reason was that the Supreme Court, which has suddenly in recent months been showing life and independence, had said they would rule on his violation of the Pakistani Constitution, which denies a candidate for office also to be military officer and to hold both ranks, senior ranks.
So he expected a vote against him at the Supreme Court, and he's now removed those people from the same Supreme Court that were expected to vote against his right to be president.
In best Stalinist style, he demanded that the justices of Pakistan's Supreme Court swear personal loyalty oaths to Musharraf. Those who wouldn't, and it seemed that they were going to rule against him, were removed. But that wasn't the only reason. The other reason was because the court ordered the release of protesters who had been arrested in the Red Mosque incident in Pakistan recently. The court said there was insufficient evidence to hold them. And third, the court
this was the incident where some Islamists had taken over the Red Mosque. There was a long siege, and eventually the army came and cleared them out.
That's right. And then the third factor was that the Musharraf regime has arrested somewhere between 600 and 1,000 people have disappeared. And they've been arrested at the behest, apparently, of the United States, which called them terrorism suspects and wanted them arrested. They've disappeared, and the court started investigating this, saying, you've got to release these detainees.
Now, this is all happening in the context of the weeks leading up to this, of an American brokered new Pakistani government. Musharraf had met with Benazir Bhutto. There was expected to be a deal, and this would sort of set the table for a real attack on the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. All of this is unraveled, and what's happening now?
The situation is more fluid than it was before. The U.S., as you note, the U.S. brokered deal has sort of been run into major problems. We still don't know what Benazir Bhutto is going to do. She is now the key player in this drama. She has not called upon her supporters in the Pakistan People's Party, which is the largest and most popular political party in the country. She's not called on them to go out and demonstrate and protest. She's remained mum about Musharraf's seizure of power. So she has to decide, is she going to come out against it? She's been calling all along, that's claiming she's going to restore democracy. Is she going to protest this profoundly undemocratic act, or is she going to continue in the sweetheart U.S. broker deal, which will let her share power with a dictatorial president, and she'll be the Democratic window dressing as prime minister?
The Washington White House has been very critical of martial law, but there's a great deal of speculation that in fact Musharraf got a green light to go ahead with this.
Yes,
what do we know about the situation?
We don't know anything for sure, but certainly there's a lot of rumor and discussion talk in Washington, and my personal understanding too, that that Musharraf's takeover of power was telegraphed well in advance to Washington and was approved to Washington. And we can hear from the little chirps of minor displeasure from Washington, and particularly Condoleezza Rice, that the U.S. has accepted it, if not given it a green light.